Hey team, welcome to the second day of our color training activity. We are trying to teach a computer to understand the differences between red, green, blue, and other, and we're doing this using a machine learning algorithm. So let's get straight to it. This is the machine learning cycle. Last time we looked at collecting data, specifically so that we could train the classifier to understand what we mean by these different colors. This was done by randomly changing the levels of red, green, and blue and categorizing each color as red, green, blue, or other just by hitting a button. And then you pasted that data into a spreadsheet, and I've taken your spreadsheets, combined them into one master cumulative data set that we can all use to train a classifier. As I said last time, the more data you have to train a classifier, the better you might expect that classifier to perform. So the fact that we've collected over 2,700 colors categorized by the two classes, hopefully that's going to lead to a really good data set that we can use to train the algorithm. Now today, we're going to move into the training phase. To do this, we're going to take this massive data set and we're going to divide it into a training set and a testing set. The training set is what the classifier is going to use to learn what the patterns are between those three numbers, those three values for red, green, and blue, and our labels for red, green, blue, and other. Now we save some of that data just for testing, because after training we'd like to know how well our trained classifier does on a subset of that data that we collected. Now you might say, let's take that trained classifier and plug it into that app that we were using to label the colors. And we're certainly going to do that. But it's nice to have a systematic way to identify how well your classifier is doing using some of the data that you've collected. So let's start that process of splitting up our data set into a training set and a testing set. Now the first thing I'm going to do, this is our cumulative data set. The first thing that I'm going to do, and the first thing that you should do with your own data set, is copy all of your data into a new page on your spreadsheet. So I'll create a new sheet. I'm going to name this new sheet raw data. I'm going to highlight all four columns of my data, do Control or Command C to copy it, and paste it onto this new sheet. The reason we want to do this is that we're going to process our data, and we want to have our original data set there so that we can always go back to it if we mess up. All right, so now that I've done that, I'm going to go back to that original spreadsheet. I'm going to clear this out, and I'm going to copy just the headings of those columns into both this training sheet and into the testing sheet. Okay, how do we randomly choose 20% of our data for testing and 80% of the data for training? I'm going to use a spreadsheet command to do this. So this is going to choose a random number between 0 and 1. I am checking to see if that number is less than 0.2. If it is, I'm going to give it the label testing. If it's not, I'm going to give it the label training. Probability that a random number between 0 and 1 is less than 0.2 is about 20%, which means this is going to give us roughly 20% of our data labeled as testing and 80% of our data labeled as training. This is a quick way to split our data set into those two groups. I'm going to take this suggestion for autofill. I'm going to copy all of this over and paste it over here. I'm going to paste it special as values only. And now that I have this, I'm going to take this data and I'm going to paste it over this data that I had before. And so you'll see it no longer has that if-then statement. I'll clear these out. And so now all we're left with in this raw data is all of our rows of data labeled as either training or testing. I'm going to highlight all of this and I'm going to create a filter view. I'm going to change this. I'm going to clear this out and I'm going to select just training, scroll down, hit OK, and now you can see that I only have training. I'm going to take all of this data and I'm going to paste it right here into my training data set. You can see that I only have training data now on this sheet. I'll go back, I'm going to switch this up, and instead of selecting training, I'm going to select testing, and now I only have the testing data. So I can do Command A, copy that data, and and I can paste that into my testing sheet. So I have one sheet which has training, one sheet which just has testing, and I'm ready to go. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to download each of these data sets as what are called CSV files. CSV stands for comma separated values, and it's going to be a text file that we're going to use to train the machine learning algorithm. This is real simple. I can just go down here, download as CSV. I do that for training. I go to the testing, and I do the exact same thing. Download it as CSV. And now I have both of these files. I can go to my downloads directory, and I'm just going to shorten the name here and call this color testing. All right, we have our data, and we're almost ready to go. There is one last thing that I want to show you. I'm going to get out of this filter view. And I showed you this in class, but I'm going to do a pivot table, selecting all of my data. I'm going to add color label here, and then for values, I'm again going to add color label. And this is giving me the number of those labels in my data. So I can see that I have 661 blue, 775 green, 967 other, and 389 red. Now this shows that we have a bit of a bias in our data. Blue, green, and other are 600 to 700 at least, pretty close to 700, but red we have very few. Now this might not be a problem, but it is something we want to be aware of. If, for example, our classifier after training isn't very good at recognizing red, well, it could mean that we need more red data in order to properly classify red colors in the classifier. For now, we're just going to keep this data. We want it to be able to know what we're looking at in our data set. This can give us some insights into our data set and how well it's going to work. Let's move on to the actual training process. All right, so we have a couple ways of getting to Create ML. One way is by opening up Xcode and going to Open Developer Tool and selecting Create ML. You can also go to Spotlight and just start typing Create ML, and it will pop up. We're going to create a new document, and we are going to do a tabular classifier. So you're going to select this one here. I'm going to call this my color classifier. Just leave that as is, and I'll save it on my computer. Now, first thing to do is we need to select our training data. So I'm going to go to my downloads directory and first select color training. The target, now this is specifically what we want the classifier to have as the output. So this is the output of our algorithm, and that's going to be color label. For features, we're going to choose red value, green value, and blue value. And you can see my CSV file has this extra thing in it. Hopefully that's not an issue, but specifically here you are identifying the inputs to your algorithm. So I hit select. You can see I have 4 classes. That corresponds with the red, green, blue, and other. And the target is going to be color label. I'm going to put in our testing data as well. Color testing. We'll open that up. And I hit train. Now this is going to do an automatic process of figuring out the best algorithm to use based on the data that we put into this. And this is a really nice capability that's built into Create ML, so we can just leave that as automatic. If you know something about your data, you might choose one or the other, but at this stage you are all new to the world of machine learning, so you can just let Create ML automatically choose. All right, let's do the training. That's it. That's how quick it happened. And you can see that this brings us straight to the evaluation phase, and this is saying that for each color, anything that is actually blue, the classifier is able to get 72% of them. Green, 69%, other, 68%, and red, 64%. So it's a pretty good performance, especially if we just think about random chance. In our data set, if you do the numbers, it's about a quarter of the data is, I think, blue. So the fact that we're getting 72% of the blue data right is a good indication that our classifier has learned pretty well on that data. And so we can use this as an evaluation to see how well our data does and decide what our next steps are going to be. The last thing you'll want to do is you'll want to save the model to your computer. So I'm going to call this my color classifier. I'm going to save this to my downloads directory so that I'm ready for the next step, and I will hit save. And there we have it. And so now in my downloads directory, I have my trained classifier ready to go. The next step is to do more evaluation. We're also going to be able to take this trained classifier and put it into an app to then see how well it does at evaluating colors using those different sliders that we used to collect our training data. That's it for training. See you next time.